Dear all, thank you and welcome. The reflection on the conference started from a practical perspective. In our relationship with organizations active in the social sector in Gozo, in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, we could not help but notice the difficulties they were facing. The COVID-19 pandemic has meant physical separation, but that physical separation has also meant that we have retracted to our comfort zone. While noting that we are all connected, and that is something highlighted specifically by Pope Francis, the COVID-19 pandemic also stopped abruptly that important physical connectedness which distinguished our relationships. And when that happens, we lose awareness. It happened to the community, and it happened to businesses. This conference has as its objective to stop and reflect, and that is what we are going to do today. In thinking about my intervention, I reflected on the message of Pope Francis to the youth gathered this year for the annual meeting of the Economy of Francesco. In his message, he reflected on the roots of the word economy, which comes from the word oikonomos, with oikos meaning house and nemein meaning manage. In fact, in highlighting the path of the new economy, Pope Francis makes reference to the economy of the land, based on the roots of the word economy. And he says that the economy of the land comes from the first meaning of the word economy, that of caring for the home. Home is not only the physical place where we live, but it is our community, our relationships. It is the cities we inhabit, our roots. By extension, home is the whole world, the only one we have, entrusted to all of us. This means that as businesses, we need to care for our community, our relationships, the places we inhabit. This is what corporate social responsibility should be about. It should be about businesses feeling responsible for the communities they are in and how their actions impact, in one way or the other, the communities in which they are operating. So why this conference? As businesses and important actors within society, our responsibility within the community is greater, and this should be acknowledged. Real solidarity and a sense of responsibility should underline all the businesses' sections. In the encyclical Sollicitudo Rei Socialis, Pope John Paul II, in highlighting how dependent we are on each other and how this value should guide our actions in a positive manner, said that when interdependence becomes recognized in this way, the correlative response as a moral and social attitude, as a virtue, is solidarity. This then is not a feeling of vague compassion or shallow distress at the misfortunes of so many people, both near and far. On the contrary, it is a firm and persevering determination to commit oneself to the common good, that is to say, to the good of all and of each individual, because we are all really responsible for all. This determination is based on the conviction that what is hindering full development is that desire for profit and the thirst for power already mentioned. In a conference on ethics and business in 1989, Cardinal Carlo Maria Martini, then Archbishop of Milan, had highlighted that though we can never move towards a perfect situation, we can help people be more conscientious and aware of the implications of their actions, leading them to make more responsible choices. The journey we embarked on as a chamber in the past 3 years had as its intent that of making our business community more conscientious of its choices and their implications. We hope that we have at least raised more awareness on the importance of acting in a conscientious and ethical manner. Let me conclude by thanking all the speakers that will be making their intervention today: Marisa Schwierep, Dr. Gordon Codina, Godfrey Swain, and Paul Curmi, and for bearing with me when tying up all the organizational aspects. I would also like to thank Fiorella Pace for accepting to moderate this event, and to Francesco Piattart for his help throughout the whole organization. I would also like to thank the staff at the Chamber and all of you of goodwill, whose presence here is surely a sign of commitment to this important subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel Borch, for your introduction. I would now like to welcome Mr. Joseph Borch, President of the Gozo Business Chamber, for his initial remarks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Your Lordship, guest speakers, colleagues and friends. It is with great pleasure and anticipation that I am introducing the third Ethics in Business Conference organized by the Gozo Business Chamber in collaboration with the Diocese of Gozo, the Centesimus Annus Pro Pontifice Foundation, and Bank of Valletta. This year's conference holds particular significance as it delves into the theme of putting corporate social responsibility into practice. In a world where ethical business practices are of paramount importance, we hope that this conference will privilege the profound influence of Catholic social teaching. In shaping our ethical compass, CST, that is Catholic social teaching, offers a rich tapestry of principles that underscore the importance of human dignity, solidarity, and the common good. It would be safe to say that CST provides inspiration and guidance to navigate the intricate intersections of business, ethics, and society. These dimensions are not exclusive to each other, but complement each other. Catholic social teaching reminds us that businesses have a moral responsibility that extends beyond mere profit generation. They are called to contribute positively to the well-being of their employees, the communities they operate in, and the environment that sustains us all. The principles of subsidiarity, solidarity, and preferential option for the poor are fundamental pillars of CST that provide invaluable insights into how businesses can fulfill their ethical obligations. If we had to align our actions with the principles of CST, if we are to align our actions with the principles of Catholic social teaching and incorporating CSR into the heart of our enterprises, we can build a more just, compassionate, and sustainable business landscape that benefits all. Our conference, with the title Putting Corporate Social Responsibility into Practice, seeks to bridge the gap between theory and action. We will explore concrete strategies, share success stories, and engage in thoughtful dialogues that can help businesses translate their CSR commitments into tangible and sustainable practices. We will also see how good CSR practices can effectively benefit the community in concrete terms. But above all, we at the Chamber believe that if a company uses good CSR practices, it stands to benefit. The company itself stands to benefit. The Gozo Business Chamber, together with our partners, is honored to serve as a platform for these essential conversations, uniting business leaders and advocating ethical business practices. As we embark on this journey together, let us remember the timeless words of Pope Francis in Laudato Si. Business is a noble vocation, directing to producing wealth and improving the world. With these words in mind, let us engage on this conference with enthusiasm and commitment to drive positive change for the betterment of our businesses, our communities, and our world. Again, thank you all for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Borch, for this introduction. And now, moving on. Our conference will be structured as follows. Ms. Marisa Schwirep will deliver her keynote speech. We will then have an audiovisual feature with 2 interventions, one from Father Michael Gallia, Director of Dar Arca, and another from Mr. Noel Sherry, CEO of the Oasi Foundation. We will later have a panel discussion. Afterwards, we will be taking any questions from the floor. So Ms. Marisa Schwirep is an economist who has worked in the manufacturing industry for the past 26 years. She served as president of the Malta Chamber of Commerce, Enterprise and Industry between 2021 and 2023, and as director of a number of both public and private entities over the course of her career. I would now like to invite Ms. Marisa Schwirep to deliver her keynote intervention.
Thank you, Your Grace, Archbishop Toma, President of the Gozo Chamber, CEO Daniel, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. For 2 years, I did this as a full-time job. 6 months ago, I kind of retired, but when Daniel approached me to do this here in Gozo, I thought something different, not just because it is Gozo, but also because it is a topic that maybe we don't give enough attention to. Now, I have a very particular perspective on this topic of CSR, because I believe that when we talk about CSR, we have to talk about it in a way which engages not those who are already doing it, but those who are not. And I will start by referring to a famous book written by Viktor Frankl in 1946, titled Man's Search for Meaning. Frankl was a prisoner in the Nazi concentration camps during the Second World War, and he observed that those around him who survived were able to connect with a purpose in life that made them feel positive, even in those dire circumstances. Survival involved identifying a purpose to each person's life through one of 3 ways, according to him. The completion of tasks, which is what we people in business do all the time. Caring for others, which is maybe what we're not doing enough. Or finding meaning by facing suffering with dignity. Now, I dare draw some parallels between the extreme tests of human endurance that inspired this book and the more mundane, if we have to be honest, challenges of running a business. Yet still, a sense of purpose is critically important for human resilience in all challenging circumstances. And running a business, as many of you here in this room know, has become very complex. It gets more and more challenging every day, no matter how much experience you have. It requires mental and physical stamina and quick responses to different adverse circumstances that are emerging at very short intervals from each other. It is therefore more important than ever before for businesses to have a very clear sense of purpose. To my mind, therefore, the most meaningful way of looking at corporate social responsibility is in terms of our broader purpose as businesses. To be able to sustain its existence, a business needs to earn a profit, and I have to say this. And those who run businesses have a responsibility to do all they can for their business to run efficiently and profitably. But that by itself is often not enough to motivate people to strive for continuous improvement as is required for a business to survive and thrive long term. And I underline the word long term. Earning a profit, therefore, is a duty for us. What is a fair profit, you might ask? To my mind, it's simply what you can earn from a business transaction without stealing anything from others, without exploiting workers, without lying to your customers, without making false declarations to authorities, and without indulging in practices that negate others the opportunity to earn the same profit if they behave correctly. Fulfilling a greater purpose through a business is a mission, so it's beyond a duty, it's a mission. You do it because you want to, because there is a set of values you believe in, and those values inspire your vision for the growth of your business. So it is a very personal thing. It requires a very deep engagement of people in business. There are, of course, choices to be made along the way, and the quickest buck typically provides no satisfaction if it goes against your values. And that is why you then tend to adopt more of a long-term vision for the growth of your business. Our corporate social responsibility, I believe, starts with our quest for knowledge, which is maybe a very unusual place to start thinking about corporate social responsibility. Why? Because we have a responsibility to know what products we are putting on the market, what they contain, how they are made, who benefits and who is exploited in the process of producing them, how that product will impact people's life in future through its consumption, during its use, or in the process of its eventual disposal. It's knowledge as opposed to blissful ignorance. It's education as opposed to spin or greenwashing. So this is one reason why I am not a big fan of how corporate social responsibility has now been somehow merged and transcribed into a set of reporting requirements, now repackaged as ESG, which I think are reductive in terms of how we engage with corporate social responsibility. Now, it's as long as you're measuring everything and every year your number looks better, you're fine, which is not the case. There is no magic wand, of course, and the choices we make often involve a cost-benefit trade-off, as in everything else in life. I mean, the easiest way to generate zero waste is to consume nothing, and we generate zero waste. Every medicine that we take has its side effects. Maximizing welfare requires striking a balance between progress and the exploitation of natural resources and people. It also requires thinking beyond the immediate self-interest. Now, if I have to be honest, we are surrounded by greed. And where there is greed everywhere you look, there is a high risk that it becomes normalized because everything is relative. This is how societies become corrupt, through the normalization of bad behavior. In societies that struggle with varying degrees of corruption, and unfortunately, I think ours is one of them, businesses tend to be scapegoated, and the words business and profit become dirty words. when the real culprit is not business or profit, but greed. Pure greed. It is therefore even more pertinent for ethical businesses that earn legitimate profit to distinguish themselves from the greedy. And this is where CSR comes to the fore. CSR has become closely associated with brand image because of the increased awareness in markets and societies about the impact of businesses on environmental and societal outcomes. And this increased awareness is definitely a positive thing. CSR in practice involves constant communication. To have an effective CSR strategy, you need to understand what really matters to your current and future employees, to your customers and potential future customers, and wider society. You also need your employees to own your CSR strategy because it is relevant for every business decision that is made, however big or small. I tend to shudder when I see companies that have a CSR department and everything else still working the way it always did. And the question is, shouldn't CSR be part of every function of the business, somehow embedded into every department? If your employees are not aware, do not comprehend, or do not share your values, they will either not be able to reflect them in the execution of their duties, or they will need to make so much of an effort to stay in line that they cannot function serenely. And they become inefficient at their job, and also they start lacking the motivation and the job satisfaction that pulls them forward. It is therefore very important to look for employees who share your values during recruitment. You might ask, cannot values be taught? Yes, in the formative years. I am personally rather skeptical on the extent to which you can alter people's values at a later stage in life. I think once unethical behavior has been normalized in people's psyche, it becomes very difficult to undo that. Corporate culture does, however, help to strengthen resolve in people who uphold ethical values. It is a fact that in a corporate world that is highly competitive, where success is measured mainly by financial gains, where mitigation of risks is highly complex, and the reward systems incentivize collusion, whether formal or informal, people are often treading a fine line. The interplay of businesses and NGOs features prominently in CSR initiatives, and for good reason. NGOs are definitely much better placed at addressing particular environmental and social causes than most businesses, but they often struggle with funding and resources. So teaming up with NGOs for CSR initiatives is an effective way to help strengthen NGOs and build programs of action that can have lasting impacts. Even here, the alignment of values is critical to ensure authenticity and misinterpretations on motivations. Businesses will be regarded with suspicion when they sponsor NGOs that work for causes that are perceived to be somewhat conflicting with the activities of the business, for example. The credibility of the respective NGOs is also undermined when this happens. It is therefore important to team up with reputable NGOs that have good standards of governance and that are aligned in terms of values and priorities. And this brings me to another element that I think is fundamental for CSR thinking and practices, and that is reciprocity. I think Daniel referred to it in his speech as interdependence. Yeah? This is most critical for a healthy employer-employee relationship as well. Employees need a decent income to be able to live well, and employers need competent and reliable employees to be able to run their businesses. Both sides are dependent on each other. Training is a key enabler in the relationship. The pace of technological advancement and the higher volatility of today's markets require organizational agility and constant upskilling of employees for businesses to remain competitive. Businesses cannot move up the value chain and carry out higher value-added activities unless their employees move up the ladder of knowledge and skills. So employers have a moral obligation to invest in the training of their employees, quite irrespective of for how long they are able to retain them. And employees have a duty to undertake training with an open disposition to learning and self-development. In recent years, as we struggle with retention, I find that many businesses are less eager to invest in training because they say, well, in a couple of years at most, he'll be gone. And I think this is something that we really need to challenge ourselves on, because I find it is key to our corporate social responsibility. Having said that, one of my greatest frustrations in over 25 years of being an employer was some of my employees' lack of enthusiasm for learning, which was typically more pronounced, unfortunately, in lower skilled workers. In such situations, it is a real challenge for the employer to behave in a socially responsible manner. I have come across companies hesitating to invest in technology because a good portion of their employees did not have the disposition for upskilling and would become effectively redundant if they went ahead with their investment plans. How do we provide quality jobs for everyone and maintain the motivation of those who are willing and able to learn in the absence of this reciprocity and the shared growth mindset? Something that I feel very strongly about is that we need to stop employing people indiscriminately just to plug in an immediate resource gap. Our recruitment practices shape the society we live in, and we need to be very conscious about this. While human resource shortages are a very real and serious bottleneck for the growth of our businesses, short-sighted remedies in the form of an uncontrolled flow of imported cheap labor will do little good for our businesses and our country in the long run. What this will do is permanently alter our social fabric at a rate which stresses not just our infrastructure, but maybe more importantly, our social cohesion. As businesses, we need to ask ourselves, how are our recruitment practices impacting society today and tomorrow, before we ask ourselves, how am I going to fill in that gap? We might need to grow at a slower rate than we would wish to. And we might need to invest some more in technology than we have been doing up to now. And admittedly, securing finance for technology investments is certainly harder than getting a loan to invest in property. But corporate social responsibility is ultimately about building sustainable business models that operate in harmony with their social and natural environment. We also need to consider growing our businesses beyond our shores. I dare say that for those who have big ambitions for their businesses, thinking in these terms is also a way of being a socially responsible business. The challenge of venturing into overseas markets is huge, yes, but it also provides a broader purpose and a pathway towards more sustainable growth for our businesses while easing some of the pressures on local resources. So CSR is not about making donations here, there, and everywhere. It's not even about numbers and publicity stunts. It is much more about mindset and long-term perspective. We have to be mindful, though, that corporate social responsibility alone, without personal responsibility on the part of individual citizens and political responsibility on the part of policymakers, will not change our society in meaningful ways. As businesses, embracing a CSR mindset provides us with a broader purpose and more meaning in what we do, and it therefore makes sense for us to do the right thing just the same, quite irrespective of where policy is going and quite irrespective of the private choices of individuals. But as businesses, we do not set the rules of the game. What we do set is the speed at which the game is played. Why? Because we tend to move much faster than policymakers, and therefore we appear to be in control. In fact, we're not. By making socially responsible choices as businesses, we can shine a light on what the direction needs to be, hoping that policymakers will be inspired to change the rules of the game in ways that will truly improve outcomes in our society. Thank you.
I would like to thank Ms. Marisa Schwireb for her very valid and extensive contribution towards this conference. And now we can proceed to watch the audiovisual feature we have prepared for you, it shows how corporate social responsibility impacts and affects foundations within the community. We can see directly how these foundations are benefiting from CSR.
Arca Foundation is an organization in Gozo run by the Catholic Church in the Diocese of Gozo, which works with persons with disabilities and their families. At the present moment, Arca Foundation runs Dar Arca, where we find around 20 people residing there, and also runs 2 houses in the community, Dar il Ġublew and Dar il Madonna Tapino, which these 2 houses cater for 10 people. For the Arca Foundation, during the times to do this project, she always relied on the generosity of the Maltese and Gozotan people, who in various occasions showed their generosity through their financial donations to help Arca Foundation do its projects. Many companies also during the years showed their responsible corporate responsibility and also donated to various projects that Arca Foundation has done to help people with disabilities and their families.
Oasi Foundation has been operating in Gozo for the last 32 years. 32 years of service to not only the Gozotan population, but also to the Maltese people at large. We have been operating in the field of addiction, providing various services, ranging from prevention services in schools, at the local community, in parishes, up to therapy, professional therapy, to those persons and their families who have been suffering from addiction. Therapy and rehabilitation, both on residential basis as well as community services. Our clientele ranges from a number or a wide range of people, as addiction has got no boundaries, sees no persons, that does not respect any race. And we have met people with high level of education, with warrants and with degrees. It is worthwhile mentioning that 80% of our clientele comes from Malta. Lately, we have been highly engaged in assisting organizations to develop a drug-free workplace, both as regards offering training to staff and to management, as well as assisting in related policies. As an organization, we face several challenges. Challenges arising from the fact that we are an NGO, operating in Gozo, and that we are an NGO operating in Gozo in this sector, in the addiction sector. We face sometimes, and we see and feel that stigma is affecting our work. We, of course, appreciate all the input that any person, any organization can give us. And this can range from a myriad of situations, not only financial, but also assistance in training, in developing more professionally, in market research, in social media activities, and the rest. We also appreciate if other organizations can assist us in the therapy we offer to our people seeking help, even from simple living skills like cooking up to financial management, personal financial management, and the rest. So I conclude by saying Oasis Foundation is a social experiment that has been successful for the last 32 years. But to continue, for Oasis to continue to offer its sterling services, yet silent and effective input to our Maltese society, we need the input of every person, may it be an individual or organization.
We thank Father Michael and Mr. Sherry for that information provided through that feature. Surely that feature has provided food for thought on how businesses can be relevant within the community through concrete actions which assist these NGOs to carry out their work. I now kindly invite Dr. Gordon Cordina, Chairman of Bank of Valletta, Mr. Godfrey Swain, Board Member at Bank of Valletta, and Mr. Paul Kurmi, Head of Document Management Services Gozo at Malta Post PLC, to join me here on stage for this panel discussion. Dr. Cordina. First of all, I thank you all for joining us during this conference in which we are discussing corporate social responsibility. We have seen also the need for corporate social responsibility, but also taken in the right context. Dr. Cordina, in your experience as the chairperson of one of the most important banks in Malta, what do you think should be the social role within the community of a large enterprise such as Bank of Valletta?
Any enterprise is intrinsically linked to the fabric of the society and culture that it needs to operate in, both in terms of selling its value added, in terms of products and services, as well as in acquiring the resources necessary to make the necessary improvement to then be able to contribute in the market. And in an ideal world, this mechanism based on enterprise would yield results which are good enough for society. In the real world, as we all know, this does not happen for very many reasons. Some of them attributed to the human nature of greed, as we have heard earlier on, but a number of them also attributable to the framework of the conditions in which we operate, which tend to incentivize behavior which is not in the social good, rather than in promoting the public interest. This necessitates, of course, the approach to positive corporate social responsibility within the wider context of an environmental, social, and governance positive approach, so as to remedy for the damages done. Now, I don't believe in any word that I've just said, to be clear. If we are to base our businesses in a way which remedies for damages done, we would be living in the world of 20 to 30 years ago. And with today's urgency in terms of climate, environment, and deterioration in social fabric, a mentality which remedies for damages done will not suffice. Clearly, the damage is now way gone far off. It is now high time for all of us in business who are also deeply engaged in their societies to conduct their business in a way which prioritizes ESG and within them CSR considerations, subject to maintaining a sustainable business, which will require, of course, a decent return on capital, just as there is and there should be a decent reward to human capital input in terms of the people actually contributing to the organization. There also needs to be a good return on capital for business to remain sustainable, but always with the ultimate end of stimulating and promoting ESG considerations. And I am afraid that this will only happen out of the goodness of our hearts in the long term. In the short term, I am afraid that the goodness in our hearts will not be enough. Because even if I am good in my heart, it's not enough. My competitor needs to be equally good in their hearts. Otherwise, in this world, we will be eaten up and the bad guys will win. So there needs to be also this framework approach in a country where ESG is turned into a competitive advantage. It can't happen in very many countries in the world, but it is relatively easy in a small economy to build its competitive advantage based on ESG type business in its tourism, in its office spaces, in its legal services, in its financial services, in a way where this element becomes fully incorporated in its profit-making model, and consequently, all the elements of sustainable development will be mutually reinforcing to one another. So perhaps in the 60s, it used to be construction and incipient tourism. In the 70s, it used to be manufacturing. In the 80s, a shift to services. In the 90s, higher value-added services moving into gaming. Now it has to be ESG as a cross-cutting motive to do good business and promote our competitiveness in the region. Once we get there, I am sure that most people's hearts will change to the better as well.
We obviously wish for that to happen too. Mr. Godfrey Swain, you are currently a member of the Board of Directors at Bank of Valletta and have served in a number of executive positions in international banks. From an international perspective, how do you think commercial and financial institutions can make a difference within the community through their CSR role? And what do you think should be the main motivations underlying such initiatives?
So today I won't speak as a member of the board of Bank of Valletta, but I'd rather focus on maybe what some of you may not be so familiar with, which is the other side of this when you are working in developing countries, some of which are extremely poor, and where the concept of CSR is completely different to what we know today. Last couple of days, I trolled through the websites of some of the large global banks, the Citibanks, HSBCs, Standard Charters of this world, JP Morgan, etc. The word CSR has practically disappeared from all these websites. All you see is ESG. That's it. Literally disappeared. And you can understand why. Climate and climate change is one of the biggest problems being faced. And in a culture of, again, I have to say the word greed and corruption, which exists in so many countries around the world, the focus on governance is extremely important to make sure that things work properly. And the social part is equally important. However, just now the main focus is more on the E of the ESG than anything else. Marisa earlier mentioned a very good point, that this should not become a box-ticking exercise. Unfortunately, the reality is that most of the big regulators around the world, be it the, excuse me, be it the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, the ECB in Europe, are focusing on inundating banks with a huge amount of bureaucracy where you have to tick thousands of boxes. But you need to do this from the heart. Ticking boxes is just not good enough. But this is more the modern side. If you go back now to the less developed countries, CSR there takes a completely different turn. I've been fortunate in many ways, so I've worked in some of the poorest countries in the world. One of them is the last country I worked in was Myanmar, what we previously knew as Burma. That is a country which has been plagued by a totally corrupt, cruel, and ignorant military junta for the last 55 years, with a brief 10-year spell of what I call semi-democracy, because it was never a real democracy, but at least they were trying. I was lucky to have worked in that country at that point in time. Talking about CSR in that country, you think, where do you start? First of all, you have to understand that when you're in these countries, the countries are ruled by the ruling elite, be it communist government, be it a one-party state, be it a military junta. It's run by a few people at the very top, the generals in this case, and their cronies, who control pretty much 90% of the wealth of the country. Everything is in the hands of the military and these cronies. So I happened to work in a bank which was owned by one of the wealthiest people in the country. Fortunately, not one of the cronies. It was more what I call old wealth, rather than wealth made under the cronies. And that was the only reason I accepted to go and work there. But the concept of CSR in most of these companies, these big conglomerates, because most of them are conglomerates which are owned by tycoons, nobody really cares. It's when there are people like myself, I guess, who have been brought in to try to modernize these companies that there is a big focus on CSR. And what we did in a country like Myanmar, because we start to look at it and you think, where do you start? This is a country where the huge bulk of the population are peasants living off the land in terrible conditions. And it's actually worse when they move to the cities, because at least in the countryside, there is some sort of family support, there's always the land to live off. When they move to the cities and to look for a better job, it's much, much worse. Because the city is unforgiving, it's cruel. There's nowhere to go, nowhere to get food if you don't have a job. And these people work on day jobs, the bulk of them. So where do you start? So actually what we did there, what I tried to do, this was in the more enlightened times when there was this semi-democratic country under Aung San Suu Kyi, was to try to provide people with the most basic need possible, which is generating water through electricity. A huge bulk of the population of Myanmar has no access to electricity, zero, which means that they cannot draw water through pumps. So we came up with a scheme together with one of the ministries responsible for electricity generation to develop battery-powered stations like PV panels for villages that could give them electricity during the day, store excess electricity in batteries for nighttime use, therefore providing them with power in their homes in the villages. And that was something which to me gave me a great deal of satisfaction, is doing something real, something tangible that can actually see, which makes a real difference to people's lives. That is real CSR in action. And what made me happiest, and what I think CSR should be focused on, more than anything else, is not just donating money, or in this case, in my case, coming up with packages that can give soft loans to villages, to communities, to get access to these PV stations, but to get your staff involved. It's only when staff of a bank or any company truly get involved in it that there is a real CSR focus. It should not just be about giving out money.
It's like
That's the last thing we should be doing.
ownership that Marisa also mentioned.
Yes, it should be about people engaging. From the top, if there is a visionary leadership at the top, you'll find that it just goes through and people get together. So that is real CSR in action. When there is a real willingness to make a positive change to communities from the very top, filtering through so that it's the people who go out to paint old people's homes, to decorate orphanages. And that's where it really works. It also brings together a sense of teamship between people, that they're all getting together to do a common good. The concept of common good to me is extremely important. Unfortunately, we're losing it in this day and age. When we talk about greed and corruption, it means it's very individualistic. One of the lovely things about Asia is the sense of collective responsibility that exists in those countries. I was also fortunate to work in Japan, one of the most developed countries in the world, where the concept of CSR, and it was CSR at that time, is very different. Because this is a country which is honestly perfect in so many ways that most of us can't even imagine. The level of service, the
Discipline too.
the way in which business is conducted. I'm sure there is corruption in Japan, like most of the places, but you don't see it. You don't feel it, you cannot touch it. The place runs like clockwork. So how do you do CSR there? There was a huge focus, actually, on what I just mentioned, using that collective sense that you find in Asian countries, which unfortunately you don't find in the West, which is extremely individualistic, selfish, with a me focus. This is what I love most about all countries in Asia, because it exists everywhere in Asia. That sense of collective responsibility towards society first, and then to yourself. Obviously your family, your society, and then you come last, not first. So in places like Japan, that's where we used to use our stuff to great effect. We used to go out helping people grow crops with stuff. I've been involved in rice planting exercises, rice harvesting exercises, and it's lovely to watch when it's in action, when you get people really coming together and going out and making a change. That's what CSR is to me.
Mr. Paul Kurmi, you are presently the head document management services at Malta Post PLC. One of the main bases upon which this conference is based is that corporate social responsibility implies that the needs of the most vulnerable within our society should be taken care of, as we have also mentioned just a few minutes ago, and that those who control businesses have a responsibility towards others. In your experience, how do you think that an important company such as Malta Post can make a difference in the community towards and through its actions?
Whoever had the experience of meeting parents who have persons with disability, and this topic of disability cropped up, I'm sure one would immediately notice that the main concern of these parents is the future of their children,
Future of their children,
especially when they pass away.
That's right.
And the financial concern doesn't come at the top of the agenda, but rather the dependency and the support the community can provide at a later stage. A few days ago, I was talking to a friend of mine, a parent, well off, who has a child with disability, and actually the focus and her concern is mainly what will happen to my child if and when I pass away. This topic of disability for children was the main basis for a project which brought together the government and Malta Post some 8 years ago into entering into a commercial agreement which intended to integrate persons with disabilities residing in Gozo into productive employment. Today, Malta Post employs 60 such employees. They come from across all Gozo. Their disability varies from physical, quite in different forms, mental, intellectual. They are supported by a few job coaches, and the project is primarily about scanning documents of various kinds and forms for government departments. Our offices, so this is an office job, and our office is open from 6 in the morning till 8 in the evening. One, to make space where you can entertain such a large group. And secondly, so that the individual can also find a work schedule which matches the needs and at times the disability, especially for those under some form of medical care. None of the employees had any office experience, or rather any work experience at all. The intellectual abilities of some of them is quite on the low side. Having said this, we have employees who had to stop their studies because of some severe injury or due to a deterioration in the mental health condition. Employees who had been long registering for a job because they got injured at the place of work and so not more able to do a manual job. Some of them, as I said, never had been in employment before. Then we have some as well who need, due to their medical condition, need to visit Mater Dei quite frequently. So most of their vacation leave entitlement is only for medical care. Some as well even need to make use of unpaid sick leave. There are 23% of our workforce which falls within this category. If you take this at a national scale, one can understand the difficulties persons with disabilities find to get a proper job. Mental health then is the most challenging. Even trying to make each and everyone understand the disability, the mental disability of another employee and support, it really becomes a challenge. But then we have as well employees whom we need to put pressure to take out vacation leave because the work environment is their only way of social life. So they make friends, they come to meet friends, and they learn life skills. Indeed, one can imagine the support and the relief parents are having, even if we offer only a few hours during the day. As one local leading psychiatrist commented, we are offering better cure than all the medicines he can even provide. Productivity does come into action, but output is not the main factor. So, because we expect that each and everyone delivers according to his and her abilities. Having said this, we do try to raise their productivity levels so that they will be happy about it.
They can be satisfied too.
They will be satisfied. At the end, we have provided through these people millions of scans, which are making life easier for the public sector employees themselves, surely for the benefit of the community, the end user, and also assisting the government in its drive to go digital. One would say, well, this is quite a challenging project. We try to understand these employees by holding monthly meetings with our main stakeholders, so Jobs Plus on behalf of the government, and Linus Peteria Foundation, who provide the job coaches. And our agenda is mainly behaviors, concerns, medical health. But through these meetings, we learn a lot, and they support us in understanding these people. Having said this, Malta Post actually did benefit as well, financially so, but it helped as well ingrain in its own culture a sense of social behavior. I would have wished to bring along some of the employees or the parents and do some testimonials, but that was not possible. But if I go back to the meeting I had with that parent, with whom I was sharing the same experiences I'm sharing today, with you today, the immediate response was, but would this project be still there when my child grows up? I sincerely hope and believe as well that more projects of this kind will come along with much more add-ons to the benefit of the disabled persons, to the parents, and to the community at large.
So today, as we can see, we have had multiple perspectives. Summing up very briefly, may you all outline one main reason now why businesses should follow this ethical path of trying to make a positive impact within their community? Dr. Cordina.
Well, I believe very much that any business which is not taking CSR and ESG into important consideration will no longer be in existence in 10 years' time. There won't be financing from the banks, which will be available, or it will be only available at a much higher cost. The clients, especially foreign clients, will not be in a position to obtain products and services from companies which are not behaving in the correct manner. And employees, especially the more skilled and discerning ones, will not want to work in businesses which have a bad ESG and, as a subset, CSR consideration. So it's a question nowadays of business survival. We need to call on regulators, institutions, and governments to, as much as possible, help in making this become a reality, because markets are already moving there globally. Now we also need to act nationally and at the community level to push this drive further, even more so in our country. I believe Gozo is fertile ground for it. Gozo is the island of voluntary work. I mean, that's the perception I have in my interaction with most people who live and have Gozo at their heart. And that is why I also believe that this conference is moving the idea of CSR vis-a-vis NGOs. Businesses may be more efficient at generating money, NGOs may be more efficient at doing social good, so it makes a lot of sense to have partnerships in order to achieve the twin objectives together. All good should be promoted, but should also be extended to a situation where business is not only about just making the money to support the NGOs, but also acting in a concrete way through the products and services and resources that it is delivering in a way which does social good. Giving money, as we heard before, doing charity should not be the way to clean one's conscience from doing what is genuinely right, and doing what is genuinely right will in a few years' time be really the only way to survive as a business. One tiny example from one of the great dilemmas that we face at BOV. In these months, we all know that interest rates are rising all across the European Union because of the inflationary tendencies that, or pressures, or really whatever you may call them, that are happening at this point in time. We at the bank have held steadfast. We are aware that our customers need stability, and as a bank, we can also afford to keep interest rates stable. Are we really doing the social good here, or are we fueling inflation in Malta and hurting the households even more? Well, you know, I won't enter into the technical details, but economic analysis clearly shows that if you increase interest rates in Malta, there will be cost push pressures, and they will be making inflation even worse, especially in a country which is full of liquid deposits. So, and I must say here, we have to courageously fight this battle against the regulators in a certain sense to say, look, for our society, for our economy, things work differently, and in order to do the right thing by our economy, we have to keep interest rates stable. It could be an easy way out for us to have, to blame the European Central Bank, increase interest rates on our home loans and on our business loans, maybe pass a part of it, as other banks are doing on deposits, and therefore be compliant and make even more profits. But that is not the way forward, and that is also, I believe, a testimonial of how doing business right would be the right thing for the business as well as for the community as a whole. In the meantime, we fight an uphill struggle to responsibilize the community at large, to think more sustainably about the future, and get more responsible about their own individual pensions. We find ourselves with huge levels of liquid deposits, which can be more productively used in the long run as pension funds and utilized to sustain our elderly. And we know what the cause of these liquid deposits is. It is there, most of them are there to eventually speculate in real estate. And, the circle starts to transform itself possibly into a not so virtuous one, which is where we need to continuously educate our customer base to price in the correct way and to say, look, real estate is fine, it gives you stability, it is important in our small economy, home ownership also helps with the social fabric, but please diversify also into other assets which could help you have a better guarantee and more stable future. So that is the kind of example that I can give in which one can link business objectives with doing what is morally right and good to society, not just those of today, but who are children today and who are also as yet unborn, that is, future generations.
Mr. Swain, regarding this need to follow this ethical path, the need to continue following, for businesses to continue following this ethical path.
Well, I'm one of those people who believes that you are either ethical or you are not. I don't think there is any halfway house here. You either have integrity or you don't. And if you are, and I assume many of you here are leaders, heading up large organizations, you need to lead by example. We all need to lead by example. I mentioned earlier the poverty I have seen, which is unbelievable in many countries, not just Myanmar, but other countries I have worked in. We are so lucky to be living in this country, which has a long history of democracy, stable government, good standard of living, but we are losing so much at the moment, so much in terms of our heritage, so much in terms of our environment. We're destroying a lot of what is good about this country. Again, in the name of greed, I hate to say. So I think all of us have a responsibility to lead by example. And once we lead by example, like I mentioned earlier, when you lead by example, people will follow you. And it's about all of us having integrity, doing things ethically, and encouraging others to follow in that path. Because once everyone is acting and working in this way, we can make real good happen. And good things happen. This is a country with a very, very bright future. Our beauty is our size, and also our ability to communicate with each other, which we must treasure and protect. The concept we're talking about today, ESG in particular, is extremely important because, as Gordon mentioned earlier, all of us have a responsibility. Banks in particular have a big responsibility because it's not just about us doing everything we can to become net zero, to make sure that we have neutral carbon emissions. But we have an ability to encourage and motivate or demotivate our clients to follow on that path. It's for a common good, not just here in Malta, but on a global level. Many scientists say we are past the point of no return. I would hate to believe that. I always believe something can and hopefully will be done. But to do that, everyone needs to get together. At the moment, we live in a world where the only certain thing is uncertainty. We're seeing wars coming up all around us. There are geopolitical tensions, threats of people who should not really be in power coming into power in many countries which wield enormous authority. Dictators who want to be there for life. And none of this is good for the democracy.
That's right.
I strongly believe in Europe, in our concept of democracy, of soft capitalism, if I may call it that, capitalism with a human heart.
Mr. Cormier, your comments in this regard before we proceed to take questions from the floor.
Instilling ethical behavior in a business, inclusive of a social dimension, and I need to add as well, not just by ticking the box, adds value and provides opportunities. Employers do expect employees to act ethically. So I fully agree with Godfrey that employers need to lead by example. On a final note, work takes so much of our time. So those who have still some Christian values at heart, work provides an opportunity. Because at the end, very often we are doing performance appraisals to our employees. But someday, we will have our own performance appraisal with our boss up there.
Thank you very much. I would now like to invite anyone who would like to make a comment or a question to our panelists here to kindly let me know by raising your hand. Yes, Mr. Sherry. Let's pass on the microphone.
First of all, thank you for organizing this conference, and thank you for your thoughts and information, very, very helpful. My question is, from a social perspective, there are people who sort of are born, they are born in observing the law and being observing norms, but then the law itself helps those who are not so much inclined in following certain norms. Likewise, and this is my question maybe to Dr. Cordina and even to Ms. Shwiref if possible, should the government engage more in policies, employ more possibly laws for companies and businesses to engage in CSRs? However, I don't want to imply that we should go as far as, and I'm going to state it here, situations like we have a law which legalizes cannabis, yet the government then enforces the providers to pay for prevention and harm reduction. So sort of where is the line, where should we go from here?
Dr. Cordina.
A couple of days ago, I was at a conference where I was asked perhaps a question on similar lines. How ethical is it for banks to give loans to 21-year-olds or 18-year-olds, for all I know, who are employed in order to purchase cars? And it's a difficult one. But the issue is that, really, as bankers, we are not at the top of the decision-making process in saying what is right and what is wrong. In a democracy, things work differently, and importantly so. I mean, we cannot, as bankers, say, look, you are right and you are wrong unless there is a law which is passed democratically or a regulation which is accepted for the common good, which leads us to move in certain directions and prescribes certain rights on some people but not on others. So there is always that context in which we must operate. On the other hand, we do not strictly need laws to tell us how to behave ethically. Ethics and moral behavior, which go beyond conduct. There are all these dimensions of conduct, compliance, ethics, should be part of the culture of the boardroom and permeated down the organization and used wisely and sensibly within the correct teachings and values in order to do what is right by society without falling foul of laws and regulations, which ultimately have to keep society together. Do we need changes in the business frameworks in order to nudge us even further in the right direction? I am one who believes that there is this need. As an economist, I am more one who is veering towards the need for regulation, education, and communication rather than leaving everything to the free market. A self-declared Cambridge scholar, but not socialist, just to be clear. But yes, the free market, especially in a small country, tends to fail when left to its own devices much more than in a big country, because when we make mistakes, they remain there, visible for everyone to see in a tiny community and for a longer period of time. And therefore, and here comes education and communication, we must, as a society, want and of course then democratically vote for what is good for us, for our children, and for the yet unborn. But to do that, we must all continue with the mission to which the Church is wholly committed through especially its more recent teachings by the Pope in transforming gradually the individual. It will take time. And the world, I am afraid, and the climate and society cannot wait. And therefore, we also need further, decisive action and regulatory commitment to induce business to do what is right. I am encouraged by what is going on globally in that sense. I am, of course, far more worried with the events which Godfrey is saying regarding geopolitical instability, which could easily dispel all the good that has been coming out of the sustainable development movement, which has been active since the 1970s. We are going through some very, very difficult days as we live through.
We've got one question over there before then proceeding to Bishop Thomas' address. Yes?
Thank you all for the wonderful insight that you all gave. I totally agree with Mr. Swain about saying that either you are ethical or not. There's no in between. But unfortunately, our culture is not encouraging ethics. And even in the education system, the Malta Federation of Professional Associations had carried out a research in 2019 where 10% of the university students felt that their future profession does not come by with abiding by a code of ethics. And I think that is extremely worrying. And especially when you have educational institutions that no longer offer professional ethics as one of their modules or credits in the courses, but it was totally removed, or in some cases, it is optional. So the message that we're giving students is when they are embarking the journey of their studies for their future profession, we're telling them, listen, ethics is is an option. Either you want to abide by it or not, which is then what leads to what Ms. Schwierep said, that there is greed. Of course there is greed, because there is no ethics. So I think that we should really work hard on changing the education system as well, and ensuring that ethics is instilled in youngsters from a young age.
So maybe Mr. Swain, your comments with regards to her comments and questions before we proceed to Bishop Thomas.
I have to be honest, I could not agree more. And it's like I said earlier, it all comes from leadership. If we have the right kind of leadership, and we all live by giving the right example, others will follow in that path. If we do things differently, the wrong way, then others will do the wrong way. It's as simple as that. And I have seen this happen. This is not just Malta, by the way. This is all countries, everywhere in the world. One thing I will say, though, is that we can live a much, much better life. Not by being stifled by rules, because obviously there is room for creativity. There must be room for personal growth, and also room for individualism. You know, I just go back to my international experience. In Japan, there is a saying, strike down the nail that sticks out. Because when I talk about collective, a sense of collective people, then people who stick out, they're frowned upon. And that should not be the case. There's always an in-between. It's about, yes, working collectively, working together, having the right norms in society, observing the right rules, but leaving room for creativity, leaving room for some individuality, which is pursuing a good cause. And if we all live that life, I believe we will all gain from it.
Thank you very much. So I thank Dr. Gordon Cordina, Mr. Godfrey Swain, and Mr. Paul Kurmi for joining me in this panel discussion. I would now like to invite Bishop of Gozo, His Excellency Anton Toma, to make the concluding intervention for this conference in which we are discussing ethics in business.
Thank you, all of you. Thanks to the Gozo Business Chamber for organizing this conference. Thanks to the speakers and to the panel. I don't understand that much about business, but I think I should be an expert in corporate social responsibility. It is the essence of the gospel. It is not only the fact that it is the current philosophy, everything is connected to everything. An expression we find even in the Laudato Si. It is Gregory Bateson's expression in the 1960s. But it also reflects the essence of the love that the gospel preaches and that the church preaches since a long time. But as you all are aware, we live in a period, as you already said, of tax evasion, money laundering, corruption, consumer protection, labor rights violations, environmental abuse, and it's becoming almost normal practice, at least for most of the Maltese and Gozitans, unfortunately. So I question what was and what is the influence of the church in all this, culture we are living in. And I feel, the must and the need to be more vociferous, to be more strong in saying things as they are. So the principles of the Catholic Church about human dignity, about the common good, which some of you already mentioned before, the principle of subsidiarity, solidarity, the principle of ethics in business practices, respect for the workers, including the workers even in important decisions, and the option for the poor and vulnerable. These principles become ever more important nowadays. The Catholic Church acknowledges that businesses have a legitimate role in society and the economy. However, it also emphasizes that businesses must operate in a way that serves the common good and respects the dignity of the human being, the dignity of the individuals. In this context, corporate social responsibility becomes an essential component of ethical business conduct, aligning with the teachings of Pope Francis. So this conference has been an enriching and enlightening experience for all of us, thanks to the initiative taken by the Gozo Business Chamber. I want to acknowledge the choice of the speakers and panelists who graced this event. The insights they shared are truly enlightening. And I believe that we are all leaving here with a deeper understanding of the impact of corresponsibility in business and in society. So on behalf of all the attendees and participants, I want to express our heartfelt appreciation for your work, dedication, and for this conference you have organized. Thank you.
Thank you. We thank Bishop of Gozo, His Excellency Anton Toma, for his insights on how the Catholic Church also looks at the need for corporate social responsibility. We thank also oral speakers today, our keynote speaker, Ms. Marisa Shwirep, our panelists, Dr. Gordon Cordina, Mr. Godfrey Swain, and Mr. Paul Kurmi. Their interventions and insights, as we have all seen, will surely provide good points for reflection on the positive actions that businesses can undertake to make a positive impact within our community. I would like to thank all of you who are present with us today. A special thanks goes to all the partners of this event, the Gozo Business Chamber, Bank of Valletta, the Foundation Centesimus Annus Pro Pontifice, and the Diocese of Gozo, which has hosted us today. We would also like to thank the Ministry for Gozo, who has financially supported us to be able to conduct this event. So I wish you all a pleasant evening. Thank you.
Recording